My name is Dr. Corey Zuppo, and today I'm talking with you about the power and promise of technological change and the challenge we have of remaining human. Clearly, the rate of technological change has been tremendous, and we all feel like we're drinking through a fire hose, which is normal in periods of high technological change. But with this, we're going to see a complete overhaul of how technology fits in with society. For instance, we used to have businesses that were considered technology businesses, and now every business uses computers in some fashion, and every business is becoming a technology business. One of the issues that we face that for me are good.
Yes.
Starting from the top. My name is Dr. Corey Zuppo, and I'm here to talk to you today about the power and promise of technological change and how we can remain human. Clearly, the rate of technological change has accelerated, and we all feel like we're drinking through the mythological fire hose when it comes to studying things like AI and cyber, which is where everything intersects for me. However, we have to realize that not only do we see changes in the way that we work and live, but our society is actively reshaping as well. Some of the things that, from a high level, I see as risks as a futurist is the risk that we become dehumanized and disconnected from reality, and that our interactions are less than personal. I was at a conference last week, a cybersecurity summit, and the thing that I noticed was the fact that people were having serendipitous interactions, meaning having the opportunity to talk about things that excited them and inspired them with regard to technology and, of course, cybersecurity. So where do we go with all this technological change? Where do we fit in as technologists? Well, we have the opportunity to sort of level the playing field, if you will, and take society under our wing from the standpoint of technology to make sure that people aren't left behind inadvertently, which could happen. We could have stranded assets of entire swaths of people who don't necessarily have the access and the tools to upskill, reskill, get new skills. So this is our responsibility. Some of the things that we're going to see, I tried to pick out 10 themes, 10 recurring themes of the types of change that we're going to see. And of course, last time I talked to you about job disruption and employment shifts, and a couple of my panelists will talk a little bit more about those things as they relate to their particular areas. Also, we're going to see some issues with inequality and access, as I mentioned before. It's very important that we get technology in the hands of the people that need it as early as we can. And I'll talk to you about something that's pretty exciting along those lines and answer to some of the problems that we're seeing in a little bit. Privacy and cybersecurity. I am tempted to put cybersecurity as the number one consideration we have, but I can't put that above the people. And especially with regard to cybersecurity, we think about our 7-layer defense model. The people are the first and most important layer, and also where we tend to find our weaknesses in our cybersecurity programs and stances. Healthcare transformation is one of the areas that I think our technological transformation is going to be very valuable in. I think we're going to accelerate some of the things that we've been researching for a while and be able to positively affect the quality of people's lives. One of the areas that concerns me is ethical AI and bias, and we will definitely get into that in a little bit. Global governance and regulation. We just saw our president here in the United States sign a document that is intended to inform and shape the way AI is going to be used. So I think that we will get into talking about that and get people's opinions as to whether they think it's going to be useful. ethical and legal dilemmas. Again, the ethical, I think, permeates everything that we're seeing. And I very much do worry that we are going to leave people behind. So this is the proactive part of where we as technologists can own the responsibility and the fix. Environmental sustainability. Think about how much energy it takes to mine cryptocurrency, for instance. We are seeing some green ways to reshape that industry, and it's pretty exciting. Finally, the biggest, and I would say outer edge of concern, is the weaponization of technology. Now, certainly when we have hackers and other types of actors who engage in that kind of behavior, whether it's sabotage or just somebody poking around where they shouldn't be, we can see how those things can be devastating. So if you think about this on a very large scale and look at current events, you will see easily where technology has been weaponized. It's a natural consequence of where we are in the world today. However, when we start talking about AI and robotics, and the more theoretical forms of AI, we have a responsibility to not spread too much of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and focus more on how we can be productive. The moral and existential questions are probably the largest and most philosophical areas of concern. I think that when we start to ponder a robot taking our jobs, we might face some of those questions all on our own. So the answer to this is to invest in our people. If we have a lot of collaboration, like Chris was talking about, between academic institutions and people out here inventing and thinking and solving, we will probably exponentially, increase our progress as a whole. And one of the things that I heard last week that I thought was pretty fascinating, this gentleman named Tony, who had been with the NSA for 35 years, stated that the evolutionary themes are shifting from individualistic to more of a collective cooperation. And I'd like to think with the democratization of what we are all doing at this time and sharing, like we're doing here, sharing our work, sharing our insights, and sharing our questions for future research, that we are democratizing not only the way that we're doing things with particular branches of technology, but also we're democratizing our knowledge. So really, this is an all hands on deck moment as technologists. I also see this as the opportunity for us to get things moving in different ways, because we're going to have to think differently. Last time I sort of in a cheeky fashion called for the eradication of our K-20 institution here in the United States. That would be all the way through your bachelor's degree, basically. And my frustration stems from the way that we are bound by education. For example, it might take me 2 years to modify what my degree program is to actually reflect what's happening in the field. And in fact, that is far too long. So with all of this, again, the societal effects may mean that we have people who need a hand in getting to the education they need. Keeping in mind also that these people are the same people who may be disadvantaged because their jobs are changing, going away, shifting, morphing. And these are the kinds of people that we want to make sure that they're not stranded assets and that they have the ability to upskill and use AI. When we look at the different types of AI that we're working on, we can see that analytics are going to be huge. This means that we need to teach our kids to analyze from a very basic perspective very early on. They also need to be thinking about what kind of jobs they're going to get when they get out of school. We still don't have the answer, but here's something that can help. When we think about these gaps that you're seeing here, and we think about cybersecurity, we have to figure out a way to train people. We have to figure out a way to make this exciting for kids. Nothing's going to change. The incidents are just going to go up, and we're all at risk. So we want our kids to be curious, and we want them to grow their potential so they can be looked at by people who are scouting for jobs and say, this person is someone who we can take into our fold and train them. They have to have imagination. And again, in our K-20 system, how many times do we smash that imagination through drill and kill and boundaries that are drawn too tight and too hard for thinking? Here's the answer. Here's one answer. This is a big answer, and it's a great answer. It's called Cyber Sports Limited. And you can see on the right-hand side, Palo Alto, Fenworks, Meta. These are some big players. And what they've done is put together this competition where the kids actively go out and hunt cyber threats. It is cool as can be. And I'll talk about this a little bit more toward the end. But what you're looking at is people who didn't necessarily have an interest in cybersecurity prior to getting involved with this game. And now they're actually receiving opportunities to go to college through scholarships and compete with each other with their new knowledge. And it's growing leaps and bounds. I'll tell you more about that later. These are the kinds of skills that Cyber Sports Limited is using and teaching and showing young kids, middle school and up, what they can do with their creative minds. And we know through the research that gaming is very powerful. So again, this is an area that I'm going to come back to, but it's a concrete problem with a concrete answer in this case. We need this in every school, everywhere. So at this point, I'm going to talk to some of my panel members. We're going to discuss what did I do?
So you want to resume. Go to Zoom. You're on the share screen.
This is the meeting.
Yeah. Why in it?
Where is it?
I'm on Teams. They should be able to go.
Oh, he's offline.
Oh no.
Are you there? If you need me. Okay, cool, excellent. There you are, JD. All right, I'm trying to get Donna Drum. Are you there too? Oh, cool. Okay, excellent. All right. So I'm going to start with you, Donna. Dr. Drum is an accounting professor who has been talking with everyone about how AI is changing their field. So what have you observed? What do you know? What are the kinds of things that you're working on with your students and colleagues to be prepared for this big shift?
Okay, that's a big question. So let me start with what I'm doing with my students. So I'm still working on this because it's so new. And as you mentioned during your introduction, academics does not move quickly, but what I am working on is how to take some of the exercises that we already do and see what we can do with them in AI. For instance, I teach them how to write SQL code, SQL. Well, AI can do that. So we just finished that exercise And so coming up here very shortly, we're going to try it in AI. And that's sort of how I teach. I teach them not to be afraid of technology. Things are always going to change. I'm old enough now, I've seen many things come and go, but you always have to stick with it and try new things. So that's what I'm doing with my students. What I'm doing with my colleagues, we have one of our alum here in Bellingham, Washington. We're a small-ish town. One of our former students runs a CPA firm here locally, and he is very excited about AI and the possibilities for the accounting profession. So I am working with him to set up a hands-on demonstration for the faculty, so that we can try it in a computer lab, see what kinds of things it can actually be used for from the teaching aspect, but also from the professional aspect. So that's the second thing. Third thing, what I have been talking to accounting practitioners about are just some fascinating things. They're doing very small things like write an if statement that will do these things for me. And of course, it'll come back with an appropriate Excel statement, but also very broad things. For instance, dealing with the US tax code is never easy. And so and we can dive into these a little bit later on if people want to, but just trying to summarize a tax issue and then coming up with a recommendation for how the client can move forward under these new tax laws. So yeah, it's very, very small specific things like Excel formulas and huge things like deal with this tax issue for me. And of course, you always have to have that professional objectivity and the critical thinking to go back and review and make sure, right, go back and check the sources. Is this accurate? But to have that initial work done for you is saving some of them huge amounts of time.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you still need the person with the expertise on the end to check the output.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is one of the things that they all emphasize, and that I in turn then emphasize with my students.
Yeah.
That you can't just blindly trust these AIs. And even when they cite sources,
yeah,
you always have to vet those sources too, because they can also make up sources.
Interesting. Bard has now provided me with 3 book titles of books that I supposedly wrote but did not, that I am currently in process with. So, you know, from the ideation perspective, it had me down, but when there was an update to the large language model, of course, it knew who I was the day before. It had my education correct and didn't have an imaginary book in there. And the next day it did, which was quite something. And I retrained it, and it still forgot my education and made up yet the 3rd book. And I thought, okay, well, I can see what I can use this for concretely and what I can't. But when you have conversations with any of these models, any of these bots, if you will, the thing is, complexity is one thing. We talk about engineering prompts, but you can over engineer a prompt super easy. And so what happens is it's like the little kid in the kindergarten class that wants to know the answer really bad. And I really want to tell the teacher the answer, but I really don't know what it is. So I'm just going to make something up. That's what AI does for us. And we have to be mindful of that, because we end up with all kinds of unintended consequences, such as, you know, image poisoning, and it's a dog, but it's really a cat. We'll talk about that sort of thing too. Let's see if anybody has any questions at the moment. Nope. Okay. Okay. So when I looked at the professions that were going to be greatly affected by AI, of course, accounting is one of those big professions. How are jobs going to change? What are they going to look like?
What I've been hearing, and actually even before AI, but for at least 10 years now, what I've been hearing from accounting professionals is that if all you can do are debits and credits, the bookkeeping kinds of activities, those jobs may be at risk
Mhm.
because those are not difficult to automate. So what's happening is that the types of somewhat menial, mindless tasks
Mhm.
are being automated. And I liked your quote at the beginning, AI will not steal your job. Someone who knows how to use AI will steal your job. And that's exactly what we see happening. But that has always sort of been true.
Mhm.
If all you could do was write numbers on a paper ledger and you didn't know how to use a spreadsheet, you were at risk. And so in my mind, AI is just the next evolution.
And it's interesting too, because of, my time in the classroom was something that kind of affirmed what I knew from industry, having come from industry into academia and now back into industry, was the fact that we have some really big blind spots mathematically. And I'm sure Dr. Daniels can speak to this as well, because when you get out there and train someone who's new in the field, and you might say, okay, let's put this into Excel and throw a couple formulas at it and, build some nice graphics. And they don't know enough algebra to construct the sentence to make the macro. Then you're remediating while you're in flight. And we're not supposed to be remediating in higher ed while we're in flight, but we do a lot of that, and it's going to happen. Has that smoothed out in your opinion? Or are we still remediating and fixing the plane while we're in flight?
I think we definitely are, in some cases, still fixing that. My students just did an Excel exam. And if things do not go exactly perfectly, they don't know how to think through the errors. They can't look at something and say, why is this wrong? It's a simple math error.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even an Excel error. So I do absolutely see that happening in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm trying to unmute you.
You can.
Oh, he has to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I had superpowers I didn't actually have. Jeff, thank you for being with us today. I think when we're talking about some of the issues with ethics, that's really kind of an area that I want you to weigh in on. When we think of ethics and bias is the biggest thing sitting in the cybersecurity summit last week that hit me, because when you think about these large language models, think about the bias of who's contributing to them, and think about the limited nature of who's contributing to them. This is a big deal. It's a small segment of the whole, small sample of the population. What are your thoughts? Can't hear you.
Tim.
Hey, thank you. And I wanted to say thanks for inviting me here, and it's good to see Dr. Drum and you, Dr. Zuppo. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the core pieces of applying AI is accountability. And if we're looking at the engineering schools and the STEM education stack, the number one field of study right now with 34% is AI and machine learning, followed by software. So we're seeing this shift in the engineering domains from purely mechanical, petroleum, aerospace. All the engineers, including the folks on this call, have a software component. They're developing software-defined solutions more and more. So when we apply AI, then what does that mean? Dr. Drum talked about the technical components, understanding the systems, understanding the math, understanding the logic behind it. It's very easy to put data into a model and get the output and say, here's the response. But I think there's a deeper level of understanding that we've got to apply, and we have accountability. And that's the ultimate backstop for either accounting in Dr. Drum's world, cybersecurity, Dr. Zuppo, you mentioned, and any software-defined solutions. we've got to be accountable and have a minimum standard of care. Unfortunately, in software, that has not been the case. We have neglected software for many, many years. And the analogy is if you go into a building, you know, a civil engineer or a structural engineer designed it, signed off on it, they are accountable. A bridge, same thing. Software, everyone kind of looks at each other and says, I don't know who's accountable for that. So it's on us as the next generation of professionals to build that minimum standard of care into our solutions and understand the software components, what we're solving, and the impact.
Yeah, I think impact is
That's-
huge. Impact is huge. And how we measure impact is one of those sort of squishy things. Speaking of squishy, I had a question come in from Chris McGinty, who just gave us the magical MEQ. So amazing. And he was talking about, you know, Sam Altman and then the whole AI thing. And I think the type of mentality where, you know, we're afraid, we're terrified of AI, but we want you to use it at the same time. And I feel like there is an ethical responsibility from people like, oh, say James Cameron, you know, the movie producer who just opined greatly and loudly that AI is going to kill us all. Well, you know, that's great, but that's not going to happen today. And we still all need to get jobs, and we still need to make sure our students and our children get jobs and they're prepared for the next thing. So I find that, you know, of the types of AI that we talk about, the categories, you know, the largely theoretical things are so far away that we are distracted. Do you see a lot of distraction, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's taking people away from what's really important, which is the upskilling?
Yeah, I'll say yes, absolutely. I think one of the early types of technologies that we've applied is robotic process automation. And Dr. Drum mentioned in the accounting world, you know, there's some routine tasking that can be automated and sometimes have a machine learning or reinforcement learning component. There was a lot of talk when RPA first came out that would take away jobs. What we're seeing is, in fact, it automates the menial tasks and lets us focus on the higher order logical tasks, like the hard problems to go solve. I believe AI will be very much similar.
I think cybersecurity is going to be one of those areas where AI is really going to be a great benefit for us. Dr. Drum, do you have anything to weigh in on that? The big T, we're talking about the big technology today.
I absolutely agree with Dr. Daniels. And I can't comment on the cybersecurity, but I can't comment on the critical thinking that's required when we're using these tools. I'm, you know, Dr. Zuppo is a futurist. I'm more of a, I don't know, tactician, maybe. I'm very much practical skills, right?
Yep.
I'm about the practical skills
Applied.
I'm trying to impart to my students. And so we have a mantra in my class: just because you got stuff doesn't mean it's the right stuff. And so that's one of the things we really work on is, how do you think critically about anything that you get, whether it's that spreadsheet from the exam you just turned in or the big data analytics projects that we're doing in some of my classes. Because I do think that's critical, no matter which field it is.
Yeah. We're applied. And I guess I should really make a mention of that, because not all PhD programs are applied programs. And so while we are certainly heavily equipped with the big research questions and you know, the big philosophical thoughts, we are also applied in our various areas, which is one of the things I think made our program so interesting. You know, Jeff, you're from the aerospace and defense industry. Donna, you're accounting and applied, and one of the most important jobs that we have in our society that's going to change rapidly. And I'm applied in the HRD and IT space. So I think we came at these issues when we started to explore the big T technology and the little t technology. When we thought about those things, it's always with the societal moral and ethical over arching questions in which we frame the practicality of what we do every day. So I'll throw one more thing out to you. How about privacy? How are we going to do this? Privacy and security of personal data. There are days, I won't lie to you, even being as entrenched in cybersecurity as I am, I feel like it's over. It's too late. They already have my stuff. It's too late. But we still have to really think about this, because with the increasing digitization of things like our medical records, we have to think about growing concerns. What do you guys see on the horizon in terms of privacy, security concerns?
Yeah, I'll start. I teach cybersecurity as well, so that hits close to home. I think in the past 3 years, we've seen cybersecurity incidents raise 742% year over year. Malware, ransomware, poisoning. You see it in the news daily. Our systems are increasingly more and more connected. There was one, I think, last week that lost 2 to 3 billion in market cap, and it was one system affected for access management that affected multiple dependent systems and companies. So not only is the accountability on the source principle to maintain the custody of our data, but it flows down. So what's starting to happen is in the, I think it's a 2023 cybersecurity strategy, we're shifting liability left. If you take custody of our data, personal data, PII, HIPAA-related data, financial-related data, you have to put the necessary precautions in place to protect that data and have a duty of care is the language. Now, all the other disciplines, engineering, accounting, medical, they have a similar duty of care when you go into that profession. And Dr. Drum, I'm sure you would recognize that with the accounting certifications. Engineering has that as well, medical. For some reason, when we develop software solutions and AI solutions, we don't have that. And so here's a cybersecurity trying to address it. Here's the software development communities trying to address it through various committees. The bottom line is the liability is shifting left. You can no longer steal data, not maintain it. You can no longer pirate the data. It's going to come back to the source, which is shift left and responsibility. So we're starting to see that trend. However, I think the controls are still very loose. Like, we don't really understand how to govern data properly. And I think you saw that in the executive order yesterday that came out on data labeling. That's a first step, but guess what it doesn't address? The appropriate controls and how to report and manage labeling of data specific in AI. But Dr. Drum, I'm curious what your thoughts are as well.
I don't get into this area as much. I focus more on the uses of the data. And so this question's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but when you talk about just the care and custody of data, that is within accounting's realm. And that is part of the audit function as well. So I do see that expanding. Accounting audits and IT audits as well are going to have to start focusing more on those cybersecurity risks rather than just the more traditional, keeping the bad guys out sort of risks. Right? So that's definitely really.
I was going to say, I think it gets really interesting. We saw that the first pieces of that with robotic process automation and auditability. Can I trust the job, right? Is it tested? Is it verified, validated?
Right.
Now, when we go to AI, how do we ensure over time that it performs consistently to give you the correct auditing, most accurate auditing results, reportable results? Because now financial dependencies are on that model, maybe medical dependencies, health and safety, critical infrastructure.
Yep.
Those are big things. And if you poison the models, the foundation models or the training to inject bias, that could skew potentially and have long-term effects.
Agreed. And when you talk about, robotics process automation, that is more narrowly defined, right? It's more like a traditional software program. You write that, it doesn't change. With AI, it's constantly growing, constantly changing through that large language model. And you can't reliably guarantee that your results are going to be the same every time you go back to that model. Whereas
Drift.
RPA, you can't.
Yep, drift. And the question came up last week. There was a keynote presentation on these large language models and, all the things that we're doing with them in a theoretical basis to break them. I kind of equate it back to the 2010s when all of the apps were exploding. And I was taking all these apps into my classes and saying, break these, let's break these. And they first look at you like you're crazy. But then I say, look, if you're going to be using this and applying it, we need to break it first. So that's what we're out here doing with these large language models. The thing is that every time you tell it that a picture of a dog is a cat, it's a cat, it's a cat, over time, it believes you. And so the executive who wants the immature chatbot on their front page has no concept of drift, has no concept of updates and how that shifts things. So when you're talking about shifting liability, you're going to shift liability for how things look on your front page. And the executive who doesn't understand the technology is going to be very mad because the bot is making up things and hallucinating as we would expect it to do when it's broken, pushed too far. So I think that, it's kind of like the 2010s when we had all of these emerging apps and things that we could throw on our iPad and do our accounting and our people management from. And it was wonderful, but they only go so far. And there are limitations. And I think there are going to have to be a lot of backstops to the way that we ease into this. But as you know, technology change brings excitement. And we get excitement and our appetite grows beyond that which we can manage it. So the last question I'd like to ask you is, how soon until we have developed technology beyond our ability to manage it? Are we there?
Yeah. I'll start. I don't know time horizon. There's been so many wrong predictions in the past. I don't want to go there, but I will say.
You on your hoverboard over there?
What's that?
Are you on your hoverboard over there, flying around Texas?
Yeah, I wish.
Right.
I think we have the responsibility to implement and manage new technologies, including AI, including open source software, understand what's in it, and not produce something more complex than we can assert control over. In other words, we must have accountability and responsibility in the systems and products that we build. And that includes, back to the very beginning of our discussion today, math, the logic that goes into our systems, understanding the dependencies, and not allow them to exert complexity or control more than we can process. And it's on us as designers and technologists and engineers to manage that. Don't design something that spins out of control, that causes potential harm, and systems, health and safety are critical. So it's back to the accountability in my mind. Yes, new technology is great. We want to use it as technologists, but we do have the accountability and responsibility to manage it properly.
I think there needs to be some restraint and adoption. I think I look closer to a Luddite than actually someone who is an early adopter. But trust and believe, when that thing emerges, I know everything about it. I go out and study it, and I can't get enough information on it. It's very exciting. But part of what I have to do to vet that technology is to say, is this something that is reasonable and will act in a way that I feel is in line with my morals and ethics for the application of this technology? It's trust. It's about trust at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think for me, the lack of trust comes about because of the inability to have repeatable results, to not understand that underlying model. And because there's no accountability, there's no, like I liked Jeff's example of the structural engineer, right? There's no way to verify these results. And so that to me is the bigger issue. And so I agree with Dr. Daniels. I think we've already gone too far without any guardrails. And I do worry about that. I'm not the kind of person that spends a lot of time having an existential crisis about it, but I do think that we're definitely, we're on two divergent paths, I think there are people who are working very hard to make it a responsible tool that we can use for the betterment of humanity. And there are other people that, I watch too many movies, but there are other people that I picture sitting in a corner going,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. The bad actors.
Yes, exactly.
The bad actors. Well, do you have anything to add before I swim into my final close here?
The only thing that I would add, and this is, as I mentioned before, what I tell my students, is you have to keep up with technology. And that doesn't mean be an expert in it, but you do have to understand what its limitations are. And to me, that's more important, understanding the limitations, than understanding it in great depth. That's my closing statement.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It's a big part of responsibly leveraging your technology. Dr. Daniels?
Yeah, I'll say on that note with Dr. Drum, the pace of technology and innovation is incredible. We know this story, but ChatGPT with a large language model hit 100 million users in a couple months. It took General Motors 59 years to produce 100 million products. So that pace of change is incredible. 59 years to 2 months. That's how quickly we're moving. I do think it comes back to the foundation, the accountability, morality, understanding the use of the technology, how you're going to apply AI, open source software, cybersecurity. The other thing I would say is there's a new certification that we're working on with the National Society of Professional Engineers, and it's centered on software and systems integration.
Nice.
And basically, we're building in the foundation to take custody of the software components, not just the physical or mechanical or chemical, but the software components to ensure that we have safety in our systems.
Big.
So please look that up through NSPE, and NICET is their education arm. It's the system and software certification.
Excellent. Great information. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to my panelists right now and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I did have one other question that I'll just throw at you real quick. George from Indiana wants to know if anybody knows the Indiana State fight song. No. Okay. Thank you. Moving right along. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So in closing, I think we're left with the fact that we have the ability to affect how people will be equipped for their future. I'm going to share my screen here 1 second. Okay. Share one more time. And the last thing I want to close with. Okay. I'm sharing Zoom.
Yeah, because you have paused off. So you have to go to Zoom in, unshare and share again. So
Where is it?
Stop.
Video.
Stop.
Share.
Yes, and then share again, but now click on the PowerPoint.
Where's off screen?
Yep. Now, desktop, or you can just do your PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My technical crew is over here helping me out. Okay.
So the last thing I want to leave you with is we've talked about a lot of heavy issues. We've talked a lot about things that will affect our society as we move forward. And we've talked about not leaving people behind. Our ethical and moral responsibilities are huge. So I'm going to encourage you to go out and look up Cybersports Limited, cybersportslimited.org, and check out what they're doing in this space. And if you have the opportunity to mentor someone in your field or get involved with cybersports and get this into all of our schools everywhere, do it. There's a huge mentorship gap. I walked around last week looking at basically two swaths of people. This group of people needs people and can't find them. This group of people wants to get a job, but can't find an employer to hire them. What's standing in the middle is our technology. It's imperative that we go out there, make the contacts, talk to the people, and mentor. There are a lot of nuances that I think people who have been brought into the workforce prior to the pandemic just observed behaviors, how to network. These are the kind of activities, cybersports is the kind of activities that will not only teach kids, middle school and up, hard skills, but also the soft skills that they need to actually be successful and get jobs. Thank you so much.